Hello everyone! In this video I am responding to a neo-fascist who thinks the dictator Augusto Pinochet was some kind of hero. Let's begin!
And it will be about a great Chilean hero called Augusto Pinochet, who is a military dictator who moved Chile into a more free market economy. And now in this video I will be talking about left-wing arguments that they use against Pinochet to demonize him and try to make him out as if he's some monster.
The left demonize him because he murdered thousands of innocent people, destroyed Latin America's oldest democracy, and left the country with a 45% poverty rate. But let's move on.
Now the first argument is that Allende was democratically elected, therefore he was a democracy and Pinochet wasn't. Now first the myth I will refute is the part where they are implying that because Allende was elected, that automatically means it was freedom and democracy. First of all, election doesn't equal democracy because there has been many dictatorships that have been elected, such as Muammar Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, Hosni Mubarak, and the list goes on of all these dictators that were democratically elected. So to say that he was democratically elected and implying that it's a democracy is just a bunch of bollocks.
Allende's Chile was a democracy, you idiot. There was complete freedom of the press in Allende's Chile. No dictator would allow opposition newspapers, especially papers that engaged in personal attacks like this. There was also opposition political parties that still ran and stood for election, and freedom of speech which allowed this pompous buffoon, Eduardo Frei, to encourage the armed forces to commit treason. On the 16th of July 1973, a few months before the successful coup, Frei declared, "There is nothing that can be done by myself, by the Congress, or by any civilian. Unfortunately, this problem can only be solved with guns. I fully share your apprehensions, and I advise you to express them plainly to the commanders-in-chief of the armed forces, hopefully today." Imagine if Chile's Franz von Papen, as I call him, had have said something like that in a real Marxist-Leninist country like Stalin's Soviet Union. He would have been arrested and shot. Imagine if an opposition leader said that in any other democracy. He would definitely be up for treason charges. The fact that Allende did nothing to silence this treasonous fascist totalitarian is a testament to his support for democracy.
Now, as for the part where leftists lie and say that Allende was democratically elected is also a lie because he wasn't chosen by the people. He was not. He won by coalition. The right won 33% of the vote, and another center-left party that was very moderate won 33% as well, and I also think that the Christian Democrats also played a role in this, and I guess lefties go to left. They decided to try and back the crazy Marxist I really love Stalin guy because the left said we can't have a right-wing government.
Wrong again. It was because the leader of the Christian Democrats, Tomic, had also offered a left-wing socialist platform, which included nationalizing the copper industry. Tomic understood that the left vote was split between the Christian Democrats and Allende's Popular Unity Coalition. Still, the election proved that the majority of Chileans wanted a left-wing government.
So because the center-left party won the majority of the votes, Allende came to power. So in what way, shape, or form is that a democracy when he was not elected by the people at all?
Using that moronic logic, David Cameron was not elected, Margaret Thatcher was not elected, and the same goes for every other British Prime Minister in history. Also note, a Chilean Conservative president was elected with only 30% of the vote in 1958.
Have you noticed when you argue with the leftists about Pinochet, Allende, and pretty much about Chile and stuff, they cannot name a single good thing Allende did for the Chilean economy. Rather, all they do is brag about how he was elected. That's all they do. They just brag about how he was elected.
Actually, there were many successes under Allende's government, such as the lowering of the unemployment rate and improvement in health standards. Also, the state-owned copper industry that Allende nationalized was the only thing that kept Chile's economy afloat during Pinochet's disastrous rule. But we'll get to that.
See, you can't expect to seize people's private property, land, and business and then not expect them to fight back. That's just plain ridiculousness. That's why socialism cannot be achieved through a ballot box. It has to be achieved through the barrel of a gun.
Proven wrong by many historical examples. The National Health Service in the UK involved the nationalisation of the majority of British hospitals. There was no civil war due to these nationalisation efforts. Indeed, the doctors instead decided to negotiate a deal with the government of the day, which is frankly fair enough. See, you have no idea what you are talking about.
Atrocities that were committed, such as rape and stuff, but if I was a dictator who was going to suppress the left, I would rather just stick to the helicopter rides and the shootings.
What a lunatic.
But in all honesty, leftists do not care that Pinochet killed.
Sub-story. He spends the next minute crying and sobbing about the victims of communism in the same video where he is glorifying a fascist dictator. I have only utter contempt for such people. He also says this about people who try to justify atrocities.
Sometimes many of them go as far as to try to justify it like the sadists and psychopaths that they are.
That is exactly what you are doing in this video, you idiot.
That what happened in Chile wouldn't have happened if they didn't put Allende in power.
Yes, it is Allende's fault that the fascist right committed atrocities in Chile.
Well, now, as for the economy, when Allende came into power, he began to abolish private property and seize control over private industries and stuff by buying out shareholders.
Buying out shareholders is not what I call seizing private property. Furthermore, Allende never planned to abolish private property. He planned for a state sector, a mixed sector, and a private sector. He never planned to abolish private property because he wanted a program that responded to the reality of Chile at that time. The next part is where he reads about the economy under Allende. His conclusions are hilarious.
The falls in export were also mostly due to a fall in the price of copper. Adverse fluctuation in the international price of copper negatively affected the Chilean economy throughout 1971 to 72. The price of copper fell from a peak of $60 per ton in 1970 to only $48 to $49. In 1971 and 1972, in addition to the hyperinflation, the fall in the value of copper lack of economic aid would further depress the economy, proof that nationalizations failed under Allende.
The low international copper price and the low level of economic aid was due to nationalization. You see, if a tiny country nationalizes their copper industry, the entire international price of copper collapses. What a ridiculous argument. That just shows his economic illiteracy.
Now here's another example of Allende's failures. It's the Chilean truckers industry. Now I'm sure many of you are familiar with the geography of Chile. Of course, it is in South America and it's next to Argentina, but there is something else. The country is very long and narrow, so the trucking industry was essential to the economy, because in order to get goods from one end of the country to the other, you need to use trucks or trains or any other form of transportation. But if the trucking industry gets shut down, then the whole country gets shut down. And what happened under the Salvador Allende regime was that a lot of truckers went on strike because obviously Allende tried to nationalize the industry. So all these people were like, hell no.
That just shows what happens when a vital part of the economy is in private hands. The private owners can paralyze the country. These truckers were also engaging in high treason, but we will get to that later.
We will not oblige to this. We are just going to go on strike. And a lot of leftists today, I'm sure the lefty watching this right now will be among them, will claim the CIA was funding the truckers' strike.
That is a fact. The CIA did not only fund the trucker strike, but also strikes involving other professional groups. Imagine if the miners' strike in the 1980s in the UK was being funded by the Soviet Union. Rightists would be the first to call it treason.
You know, this whole thing was orchestrated by the US imperialists, and that these people will never have gone on strike if it wasn't for these evil capitalists in the American government. But that is a lie. They went on strike way before the CIA even knew anything, and then
The CIA had been involved in Chilean politics since the 1960s. They heavily funded right-wing political parties and newspapers. Furthermore, the CIA also attempted to stop Allende from being inaugurated when he won the 1970 election.
With the inauguration approaching, word of possible covert action against Allende reached General René Schneider, head of the Chilean military. Schneider announced he would uphold Allende's confirmation by the Chilean Congress. He was unaware that men from within his own ranks were being recruited by the CIA.
The CIA gave me $250,000 to use it was the military we could count on to come and help us maybe get rid of Snyder. That was the key, get rid of Snyder. Well, I couldn't put it in my office safe because everybody used the safe, so I kept my riding boots. The money was done up in sausages, like, long strips, and I put the money in my riding boot, and no one used it but me.
On top of this, they also say that Pinochet had a 40% poverty rate, but Allende had it much higher.
That is a blatant lie that is not backed up by any evidence. Poverty doubled under Pinochet due to his idiotic policies. That is a fact. He left Chile with a poverty rate of 45%, more than double what it was in 1973.
But anyway, another thing that they also like to say is that to apologize for the Allende regime, they like to say that there was an embargo and stuff, but you also have to keep in mind, and again, I'll be providing all the links below the description. One thing you also have to remember is that Reagan himself had a neutral view of Pinochet, and there was economic sanctions placed by the U.S. on Pinochet, but yet, did Pinochet screw up like Allende?
Actually, Pinochet received far more financial aid from foreign organizations than Allende did. Just see this graph which shows the level of foreign loans given to the two governments. Despite this massive support, Pinochet managed to plunge his nation into two severe recessions, preside over a 20% unemployment rate, and managed to double the poverty rate. Also, the only US president to introduce economic sanctions against Pinochet was Jimmy Carter. Ronald Reagan lifted all the sanctions when he took office. Also, cast your mind back when this moron said this about people who tried to justify human rights abuses committed by leftist governments.
Or sometimes many of them go as far as to try to justify it like the sadists and psychopaths that they are.
Now listen to this.
Now, they must pick here. All of you guys must decide right here now at this point. It's either millions of people starve under communism, or a bunch of communists getting free helicopter rides. Come on, pick.
What a joke. I forgot to mention the food situation in Allende's Chile. Rightists claim that Allende's policies caused a shortage of food, but the reality was quite different, as explained by an economist.
What they did, and that's why I think one has to get the story very straight, they created destabilization. There was economic turmoil in Chile. There was a trucking strike, which was very important for Chile because we're a very long country. We're like a spaghetti, we're so long, and our highways are basic, and trucking is basic. And trucks stopped because they were paid not to work. And they received more pay not working than working. Yeah, let's remember that the day after the coup, all the supermarkets were full of food.
Right-wing dolts hate this guy. After all, he has a master's in economics and they are economically illiterate. Keep that in mind. This guy has a master's in economics, whilst his critics who sent me this picture are economically illiterate. Of course, his statement is backed up by other stories, such as this one. Now, why did I bother responding to such a moronic and stupid video? For a few reasons. It was easy to debunk, debunking videos made by idiots is enjoyable, and I could not think of another video idea. Perhaps some people in the comments section would like to help me with that.